let's have a brief recap of what we discussed. Starting at first principles, the essence of nature is change. Things are always changing, things are impermanent, they're always in flux, and the question then becomes, how do we want to influence this change in a way that fits our desire and our personal needs? This can be done on a very small and simple scale. We can make small influences into reality, or very big and complex. And where we draw something on this line, that is where we set goals. But goals are completely arbitrary. They're just a way of giving us some guidance, but they're completely arbitrary in where we set them. Now, when we set a goal, we need wisdom to know what it is that we desire. What is the goal that we want to set? Then we need knowledge to know how are we going to get there. If this is the thing that I want to create, then how do I use the building blocks of reality to actually get that thing? That is where we need the knowledge. And then the next part is that we actually do it. We execute it. We actually influence the world to create the planned structure. And this combination of knowledge and execution, that is what we call our production capacity. So we need production capacity in order to turn our goals into reality. So how do we increase our production capacity? We can either increase the size of our own production capacity through learning and skill acquisition, which is usually done through personal projects. We can increase the quantity by influencing people and robots, which usually happens in collaborative projects. And then humans are influenced by social dynamics and by capital. We either pay them or we influence them through our social skills, and robots are influenced through technical skills. And of course, humans can influence robots, and robots can also influence humans. And just like that, we can increase the total amount of production capacity that we have to actually reach the goals that we are trying to reach. And as we are increasing our production capacity, increasing our leverage, increasing our competence, our zone of influence becomes bigger. So we start off with a small zone of influence, but we can grow that with leverage and competence. Then some parts of Project Humanity are permissionless and skill locked. These are things nobody wants to do or nobody is doing that we can simply go and do. The only barrier is that we need the skills to be able to execute it. But there's also things that are permissioned and resource locked. And this is usually where our part of Project Humanity overlaps with somebody else's project of humanity. And then we need to negotiate. Either this is going to become a competition where it's a zero-sum dynamic, right? Either I win or you win, or it's going to become a collaboration, a positive sum dynamic where 1 + 1 = 3. The two of us come together to generate extra value for both of us. And ideally, that is the game that we want to be playing as humanity. We want to increase the resources for everyone. Then we looked at some practical things that you can do to increase your zone of influence, which is building a strong track record and portfolio, having long-term relationships, long-term games with long-term people, taking initiative, being proactive, doing things just because you think that they need to be solved, developing your social skills, speaking, listening, public speaking, leadership, becoming an expert, and then preferably becoming an expert of your own particular niche. And the last one is delivering valuable output and doing so on a consistent basis. Okay, now let's dive into Notion, because this is what you're here for, building the good stuff. All the philosophy and stuff is nice, but we want to have some practical shit that we can do inside of our Notion system. So the first thing is that we, of course, go to the database collection zone. And then under the execution and planning databases, we have the project tracker. So we're just going to open up the project tracker. And then the first thing that I want to do is to show you all of the different properties that this database has. Now, some of these properties are quite complex. I'm going to explain them up front. Later on, I'm going to show you how they work and why we have them. So the first one, obviously, as always, is the name. So this is the name of the project. Want this to be clear, want this to be self-explanatory. But if you're working on a project, you'll remember the name. These things will become ingrained in your brain because this is pretty much, all the work that you are doing. So you will always be aware of the projects that you are working on. Then the second property over here is a date property in which we have the date span. So you can see there is a beginning date and there is an end date. We can simply click there, switch this one on to have both a beginning and an end. Beginning is going to be December 20th, and then, for example, end will be February 29th. And like that, we can set a span for how long we want this project to last. Now, this is part of making a SMART goal, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Now, some of those letters I don't really take into consideration, but the time-bound here is very important. We want to have a time that we want to spend on this project. Then the next property that we have over here is a formula that calculates how many days are we past the initial end date. So it's taking this last date over here, right? So I want to finish this project by June 30, or I want to finish this project by February 29. This is the time-bound aspect. And when it goes over that, it tells you how many days did you go past the initial project. So this one is 203 days overdue. This one is 142 days overdue. This one is on schedule. Formula looks a little bit complicated. I will update this later on using Formulas 2.0 and drop it in the description. For now, you can just use this and know that it will show you how many days past the initial date you are. Now, the goal here is not that you always want to finish your projects on time. Of course, ideally you do, but at points you are going to go over the time. This helps you to see how far past the initial time you went. And then later on, when you're reflecting, also provide you with insight in where did it go wrong? Why did I go that far past the initial date? And could I change things to prevent this in the future? So as always, with everything in the system, the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to improve. And this will just help you keep track of that. I'm just going to quickly remove this one because that's not supposed to be in there. Then the next thing we have over here is the status of a project. Now, when we set an initial project, like we just saw in the flowchart, we initially set it to next up. These are projects that are planned for the future. So let's say, for example, I'm just going to give you a little sneak peek here of what's to come. I have a vision goal over here. And this vision goal is to have a career doing what I love, earning and saving enough assets so that I have the freedom to live life on my own terms. This is actually one of my own vision goals. Then over here, I can already schedule projects ahead. I might already know a few projects in advance. Now, I don't use this very often. Usually it's more of a thing that, because projects tend to last quite long, that come up as time progresses. But you could already have a bunch of projects in here. And then you could have the status be next up, right? So it's not a project that I'm working on right now. It's a project that is next up. The other status we have is active, projects we're working on right here, right now. And then we have either the completed or terminated project. Completed is when it's met the definition of done that we set. Terminated is when we decided, actually, sometimes winners do quit, and this is the time for this winner to quit. So we terminate that project over here. Then we have a relationship to the action tracker so that we can see all of the actions that are related to a particular project. And when we get into the template, you will see why this is so tremendously valuable. Then over here, we have a number property in which we write down how many hours we are expecting to put into a certain project. Because the date span that we have over here is how long it will take, how long we have to finish it. But it doesn't necessarily say how much time we spent in a project, because one project could only require 50 hours of work, where another project could require 500 hours of work. So this expected input is much more about the total workload that this project is going to take. Then over here, we have a roll-up, which calculates how much weekly workload we have planned for a specific project. I'm going to show you later how that works. Not interesting for now. Over here, we have a roll-up that calculates how many hours we already put in. And the way we do this, also I'm going to explain this more in depth later, is by saying from this relationship that we have with this action tracker, right? We related it to the action tracker. I want from those actions to get the property input based on completed subtasks. So if I were to open an action item over here, you can see these action items have a property called total sub input. And this is the total amount of time that I put into this action item. So if this action item took, for example, 90 minutes, which I would put over here, and I've completed it, you can now see I put 1.5 hours of work into this. I'm going to show you later how this works, but basically all you need to know right now is that this one over here calculates all of the action items we did, how much time we spent on those action items, and then translates that into the total amount of time we put into this project. And then over here, we have another formula, which is the progress that we are making on this project. And what this formula does is it's saying, I got this expected input over here, right? I was supposed to put in 75 hours of work. I've already put in, based on the actions that we've been doing, I've already put in almost 7 hours of work. Then the progress that I'm at right now is 9%. So over here, we have a rough estimate of how much progress we have made for this project, right? You can see over here, total input hours divided by how much we expected to do it, and then some calculations to make sure we get the right percentage. Now, sometimes a project might already be done at 80%. Sometimes we might go way over it and be at like 150%, but this is rough ballpark number. My initial goal was 100 hours. I put in 80 hours. It gives us some insight into how much progress that we are actually making. Yeah, a little bit complicated. We'll get into it. The next property that we have over here is the review date. That is, when are we going to revisit this project? Because every week we have a weekly review. And I'll just give you another sneak peek into the system. Let's go into the weekly review. Just real quick. Over here, you can see we review our projects. And then over here, there is a review date. And that shows us this project is due for review. We have a little formula over here that also adds this red circle when it's past the review date. So were I to put this on today, for example, it is not yet due for review. But if it were over here, then it is due for review. So the review date basically means when do we need to review a particular project. Some projects need to be reviewed every single week, some every second week. That is something we can decide for ourselves. So that is the review date property, the review overdue formula, which is basically saying if the date is past this day, if today is past this date, so we're saying over here, if this moment right now is past the review date, then give me this little red circle, which just makes it easy for us to see when we need to review a project. And the last property we have over here is a relationship to the vision goal. Because like we said, ideally all of our projects arise from a vision goal. So then over here you can see this one is related to that vision goal I just showed you. And that just helps us to see that the projects that we're doing are actually contributing to the person that we want to be, because that is the essence of our system. We want to bring into alignment who we are with what we do, who we are inside what we do, execution. Those are the properties that make up the project tracker. Now let's get into the most valuable and important part of this entire thing. This is where the project tracker really shines, and that is inside of the templates. Now there's two different templates. We have the new project templates, which is for general projects, for big projects, and then we have the mini projects template. Now I'm first going to run you through this one because the mini project is basically a duplication, but it's just less exhaustive. Okay, so let's just open up this template over here, and of course there's a beautiful banner. You know, we like to have some good design, and we have our dedicated emoji because we use that for consistency, because that is one of the principles, consistency in design. And then over here, you can see a few properties that we can use initially to see the project. We have the date span on the top. We have the weekly workload, which basically measures how much hours we're planning to work on a project based on the actions that we've planned for the upcoming week. And then we have the expected input time, the total input that we actually already put into this project, and the progress of how far along we are with this project. The first thing that you see here on this dashboard, and I already said this in the flowchart, but I'm just going to say it again, is a reminder that if you are not able to invest 60 minutes into properly preparing this project, then don't start it. I have to explain this so often to people. I have to explain it so often to myself. It's like, oh, I'm just going to quickly whip up this project, but I don't have the time to fill in all of these preparatory questions. Don't do it. Don't do it. Projects are large commitments. They take a lot of time, a lot of energy. If you can't spend 1 hour preparing a project, then you don't want to be spending 50 hours working on the project, right? So that's a very good proxy. Like, the barrier to entry is high. I understand it can be a lot of effort to fill in all these questions. Use that as a tool. Use that as a filtering tool to see, is this actually worthy of my time? So it's actually a very nice filtering mechanism in this sense. So that is always a reminder. If you don't have the 60 minutes to fill in the preparatory questions, don't start the project. Okay, so then the first thing that we actually do, we'll cover this later, the first thing that we then actually do is have these questions over here. And these are 5 sets of questions that help us prepare and scope the project. And I briefly showed you this in the flowchart, but let's just go through these different questions. Question number 1, and arguably one of the most important questions, is what is the main SMART goal of this project? And SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So the achievable part, I always say, fuck that. We want to be ambitious. What does achievable even mean? I don't think that one really makes a lot of sense. So actually they should be called SMRT goals, right? They need to be specific. What is it that we actually try and reach with this project? They need to be measurable. What metrics can I use to track this? How do I quantify this? How do I measure whether this project is being completed, whether this goal is being reached? Is it relevant? Is the goal relevant to this project? And even more important, is this project relevant to the overarching vision goal, the thing that I really want to put into this world? And then the last one is time-bound. When do I seek to complete this goal, and how many hours am I going to put into this goal? Now, for all questions, I always have a reminder over here. So if you're scoping this project, right, this is the SMART goal. You can just write that in there. You can open that one up. Over here, you can elaborate, right? So in this property, you can write everything you want to write about this SMART goal. And then always in the reminder, you get some extra information on how to approach this question. Right, so that is the SMART goal. And just to show you real quick what sort of database we actually have here, this is a linked version. Let me show you the database title. A linked version of the reflections database, which is coming in a later video. And then inside of this linked version, we have a filter, which is basically saying that I only want to see reflections that are related to this template. So the moment I create a new project, the reflection question is automatically tied to this project. So I only see the reflections that are specific to this project. And I only want to see these 3 questions in this view. This is a quite complicated filter. All you need to know is that I just have these questions here and I can just fill them in by going over here. Okay, the next question that we have is, which vision goal does this SMART goal contribute to? Now, ideally, we've already linked a project to a vision goal. Right? If we go over here, you can see this one might already be related to a vision goal. If it's not, this is the moment to prompt yourself. Let's say, for example, it's a project that came more bottom up. It's one of the Life Happens projects. This is a moment to prompt yourself, which vision goal does it contribute to? And how does it contribute to this vision goal? We always want to spend time meditating, thinking about, is the thing I'm doing contributing to the person that I want to be? Okay, the second set of questions we have over here is the sacrifice. What is the sacrifice that I need to make for this project? First question is, what are the costs of pursuing this project? How much time, how much energy, how much money? What am I giving for this project? What is the trade-off that I need to make? And then the second question is, am I willing to pay this price? It's an important question because if the price is too high and I'm not willing to pay this price, then don't do it. Very often we set ambitious goals, we have ambitious projects, but we're not actually willing to pay the price. Now, you can be ambitious, but if you're ambitious, you need to be willing to pay the price. So that's why we ask ourselves the question, am I willing to pay this price? The third question is, what will my day-to-day life look like when I'm working on this project? So this is really a moment where we tune in and we try to feel and visualize, what does my life actually look like? if I'm making this sacrifice, if I want to run a marathon, okay, I need to train every single day. I'm running 8 hours per week. I need to sleep plenty. I cannot go out for drinks. Really try to visualize what does my day-to-day life look like when I'm working on this. And then the follow-up question there is, do I want the lifestyle that comes with the pursuit of this project? So if that is what my day-to-day life looks like, is that actually the life I want to be living? Because if it's not, better not to pursue the project, right? So this is all about asking ourselves the tough questions, but also making sure that when we commit, then we're really committed and we know like, hey, I really want this. And it's not just a wish or a dream, like, oh, that would be really cool. No. I actually really want to do this. Okay, so the next one is about the challenge. And this is also what I was referring to earlier on in this video. We want to be at the edge of our capabilities because that is what gets us into flow. And let me just briefly grab this chart here to illustrate this. Over here we have the user capability, what we are capable of. And over here, the task, how difficult the task is, right? Remember that leverage that we had at the beginning. What are we trying to move and how much can we move? If we are trying to move more, right? If the difficulty is higher than the capability that we have, that gives us anxiety. And if we go way to the extreme here, that ends in a burnout. On the other side, if we have very high capability, we can lift something very heavy and we decide to lift something that is very light, we become bored. You can get a bore out, right? And this is people that have a job where every day just feels like dying on the inside because it's so goddamn boring. What we want to be is we want to be right in the middle. We want to have a good balance between the capability that we have and the thing that we're trying to do. And that is why we have this challenge chapter over here. So how challenging is this project and why so? Here we try to think about how challenging is this project really and go a little deeper on that. Then the second question is, am I on the edge of my capabilities working on this? If this is how challenging it is, then how does my skill set fit into that? How do my capabilities fit into that? Am I on the edge or am I burning or boring out? And the last question then is, if it's not on the edge of my capabilities, how do I make this project either easier or harder so that it is on the edge of my capabilities? The next chapter is about the complexity. This is how many moving parts are in this project. One project could be very simple, like me trying to run a marathon. It's just me. I need to go out there. I need to train. It's not super complex. But if I'm doing a project where there's a lot of people involved, I'm trying to build a product or a business, then it becomes much more complex. And complexity is very hard to manage. So it's good to think upfront about how complex this project is. What parts, what people, what environment influence this project? Then the follow-up question is, will I be able to handle this complexity? And if I will, how will I do this? How will I make sure I know how to navigate this environment, to speak to the right people, to have all the parts in place? And if I am not able to handle that, could I change something about the complexity, or could I ask someone to help me navigate this complexity? So we want to make sure that the complexity of the project is something that we're actually able to handle, because otherwise it can become very easy to drown in all the moving parts, and before we know it, we are overwhelmed. Then the next chapter over here is the definition of done, and this is basically the question, when is this project done? We want to make sure upfront that we know when this project is done. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this has a lot of overlap with the SMART goal, but the definition of done could be different. We could have other conditions that when they are met, we will terminate this project. So for example, one condition might be when I reach the SMART goal. Another condition might be when I spend 50 hours on it, then I want to quit. So it could also be a definition of termination, or it could be this one is done when I have put in so much time and energy and resources, or if I've hit certain intermediate thresholds, or if I hit one of the parts of my SMART goal. So the definition of done can also be smaller or different than just a SMART goal, but usually the SMART goal is at least one of the potentials of the definition of done. Also good to mention there is that when you have this definition of done, it could have different options, right? You could say either I do this, either I do that, or either I do that. I don't have to hit all three. If I hit one of these three, I consider this project to be done. Then we look at which steps will I need to complete to finish this project. What are the intermediary steps, right? We're going from the left side, vision goals, SMART goals, milestones. And this is also what we fill in here. It's also what we put over here for the milestones. So these are smaller things that I need to complete on the way for this project to become done. And then the last question that we ask ourselves is, what would it take for me to quit pursuing this goal? Like I said, sometimes winners do quit, and it can be very valuable to think upfront, when are you going to quit? So if my goal is to have a business that generates 50,000 in revenue, I could have a condition where I'm saying, if within 3 months I'm not already generating 5,000 in revenue, then I'm so far off track that I'm going to quit pursuing this goal, because apparently it is not working out. So we can set conditions up front for when we want to quit this goal. And then when we quit, we can also feel much better about our decision, because we know this is not just a sign of weakness or laziness. No, this is me making a wise decision, because this is not the goal that I want to be spending my limited time and resources on. And then the last thing that we have over here is the commitment. We speak out my commitment to this project, right? And we make that a strong statement. We set it down and then speak it out loud, share it with people, convince yourself and say, I'm going to do this. I am making this commitment. I am going to put in 500 hours of work in the next 6 months. Like, that is a big ass commitment, but I've thought about this properly. I filled everything in. Now it is time. It is time to make that commitment. So that is why we put the commitment in over here. Okay, so that is the preparatory question section. Once again, if you're unable to invest the time to do this, don't start the project. Over here, the next thing that we have is the project workspace, and this is where the magic happens. As you can see, we have 5 different database views over here. 3 of them are related to action, right? Action habits and the action timeline. 2 of them are related to knowledge. This is our production capacity. This is the practical engine that is going to help us turn our visions, our desires, our needs into reality. So let's start with the basic, and that is the related action items. Now, for all of these databases, what we do is that we have, I'm just going to show you, a linked version of the specific database. So in this particular case, it's a linked version of the action tracker. And then inside of the action tracker, we actually have a property. I'm just going to show you that property over here, where it's related to the project tracker. So this particular action item is related to this particular project. Now, the reason that we have this relationship property, is that so when we have that, we can say over here, I want to filter my actions to only show action items that are related to this project template, right? And we do the same for our habits. We do the same for our meeting notes. We say over here, I only want to see habits related to this project tracker. I only want to see meeting notes related to this project tracker. And to be able to do that, we need to create a relationship between the 2 databases, right? We need to make sure that these databases know that the other one exists. Now, you might wonder, but why didn't we see all those relationships over here? It's because we don't need to see them on the project tracker side. We don't need to filter anything on the project tracker. And the only one we actually need is the action tracker and vision goals. So we only need to see it one-way street. And the reason that's the case is because over here, I'm showing the actions database. I'm showing the habits database. And inside that actions database, I want to create a filter based on the project tracker. But we don't need to create a filter inside the project tracker. We don't need to create a filter the other way around. Complicated stuff, I would reference you back to the video where we look at relational databases. Just good to know, each and every one of these has a relationship. So I'm going to hide that one in the view because we don't need it over here. And then so over here we have this filter that it's only showing actions related to this project tracker template. Now, suppose that I would have made an actual project. Let me just open up this one, for example. Then this filter is automatically changed to only show action item related to this particular dummy project over here, right? So the moment you generate a template, this filter is automatically adjusted. It goes from template into the page that you actually created, right? So we have a sort of like dynamic filter. It's a really cool feature that Notion has. One of my favorite things. Saves a lot of time and energy. Right. So we only see action items related to this project, and the moment I add a new action over here, if I were to open up this action, you can see it is related to this project. So over here, we have all the actions that we want to be doing for this particular project. Now, before we dive deeper into this one, I first want to show you the action timeline, because this is an intermediary step that we can use to translate a milestone into an action. So we keep going more granular, right? We're starting with these goals and we keep getting smaller, 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 smaller. We want to end up on actions. But what you can do in the action timeline is you can actually scope action chunks for longer periods of time. So let's say, for example, there's something I want to be working on this week. This week I want to finish the website. All right, I can drag that one out. Next week I want to publish 3 videos. Right, we can start creating this timeline of actions that we want to take. Now, the moment I add them to the timeline here, they also appear over here. There we go. These are the action chunks. These are the bigger actions that I want to do. And what you can see over here is that these action chunks have this little emoji over here. And I briefly showed this in the action tracker video, but there I told you I was not going to go in too deep. Well, now we are, because over here there is a parent template. And these are basically action items that we call parent actions. They're not an action that we complete in one sitting, but they are a larger action in which we have these actions that we can complete in a single sitting. I'll briefly show you this template. It basically says that the action status is parent, and it gives this little emoji to easily recognize it. And the moment that we add a new action over here, the default template is a parent. So anything that we add in the timeline is automatically a parent. And my apologies, the sun is right in my face. I hope it doesn't bother you too much. So then over here we have these parent actions with also a date span. So they don't just have a due date, they have a date span. Then what we can do is we can go inside a parent action, right? Over here we have this little toggle, and we do this by going into the properties, and then over here we have sub items, and we have sub items enabled, right? I could also disable this, but I'm going to enable it. And that allows me to, under this parent action, create sub actions. So finish the website, and then one thing might be create lo-fi wireframe, right? Or publish video. One could be write first script. Maybe that's easier to understand for the non-designers out there. Record a video, edit a video, and then publish a video. And like this, we can easily gather our actions that we actually want to do in a single sitting and organize them by parent action. Then the rest of this view just works like the regular action tracker. We just have all the actions in here that we want to do. And for example, this write first script, I'm going to say that has the action date for the 21st. This one has for 22nd. This one has for 23rd. And this is something that we do during the weekly review. During the weekly review, we check in with this view and make sure that all the actions are scoped. Now, over here, we have a few properties. And what we do for action items, you don't have to do this, but I think it's quite valuable to have a rough estimate of how long we think this action item will take. So writing a script will take me approximately 60 minutes. Recording a video will probably take me like 90 minutes. Editing will probably take me like 120 minutes, and then publishing only takes like 30. Over here, you can see that automatically this formula called weekly workload also changed. What this formula does is it checks if an action item is due for the upcoming week. So it checks over here. Is this action item due for the upcoming week? All of these are. If that is true, then take this projected input, turn it into hours, and add it to the weekly workload. If I were to, for example, put this one on last week or on in 2 weeks, it doesn't register, right? So there's no weekly workload. So it's only action items for the upcoming week which then get this weekly workload. And then what you can see over here is that inside this project, we now have the weekly workload being adjusted to the total amount of time that we have right over here, right? So this is a roll-up, and a roll-up is basically saying that from this relation to the action tracker, I want you to grab this property, this weekly workload property, and then give me the total sum, right? So it's grabbing this property over here. Were I to remove one of these, for example, I would set this to like the week after. You can see the weekly workload is gone because this formula only counts actions for the upcoming week. And then this roll-up, once again, only takes the sum of this weekly workload over here. So you can see the workload has now been reduced to 4.5 hours. So by simply assigning a estimated time, this doesn't have to be accurate, it's just an estimated time, you automatically get to see how much workload you're expecting to put in this project in the upcoming week. Now, were I to complete these actions over here, then over here you can see another formula which is calculating if this has been ticked, then you can see the digits change. Count this as time actually spent working on this project. And this is then calculated in the roll-up of total input in hours. So this is once again going into this relationship with the action tracker, but now we're grabbing this property total amount of time spent working on this project. And let's say, for example, that my goal was to spend 20 hours. You can see that the progress is automatically calculated. So if I were to uncheck these boxes, this is 10% progress, but as I'm going through time, and the cool thing here is, right, let's say these actions over here, let's put them for today. I'm just going to put them for today. I'm just going to go into my execution zone. This is where we usually live. I just have my daily action list over here. These are my daily actions. You can see they are related to this project. I can just tick them off in my action tracker, and when at the end of the week I check in with my project, it's automatically been added over here. I automatically have that input and my progress is automatically being measured. So complicated to set up and understand, but once you have that understanding, all you need to do is fill in this over here. That's all you need to do, just an action date and this over here. Everything on the right here happens all by itself. And like that, we can easily track how much time we're planning to work on a project, how much time we actually put in, and how much progress we are making towards this project. So that is why we have all these properties, formulas, and stuff over here. And a little extra bonus is that we also have one roll-up, which is basically showing how much time did one parent action take. So if the parent action is published 3 videos, it calculates all the sub-actions that have been completed, and then it shows me, hey, this parent action took 5 hours to complete. Not super necessary. I don't use this one a lot, to be honest, but it's there in case you want to track it. So just to recap, because this is quite complex, we can create parent actions on the timeline. And then from those parent actions, we can create sub-actions in this view. These sub-actions we can just execute in a single sitting. And inside those sub-actions, we make a rough estimate of how much time we are going to put into this action item. Then if they are due for the upcoming week, they are added to the weekly workload, which we can see over here. And then when we complete them, they're added to the total input that we put into the actions. And that is calculated over here and also works towards this progress. Now, not all actions are always coming from the timeline. There's also things that come bottom up, requests people have, just things that come up in the moment. Of course, you can just add a new action here. And then if you put the time in there and the date, it's not part of a parent action, but it will still just work just the same. And the reason it works just the same is because this one does not have that status of parent. And then over here, you can see it's added to that weekly workload. Okay, so that is the action part of this dashboard. That's how we track all the actions that we have for a project. Then we also have habits, or we don't have to have habits, but we could have habits. So these are actions that are repeatable. So if, for example, for this business, I want to cold call 10 people every single day or 3 times per week for the coming 3 months, then I could make that a habit. Cold call people. I'm going to do that 3 times per week. I'm going to do that from the office. I'm going to do that at 8 in the morning. And that is a habit I'm currently building. It takes about 30 minutes. This is an action I'm repeating. That is why it's a habit. We don't need to do all these unique actions for this. This is something I do over again. We are going to cover the habit tracker in a future video. So for now, I'm not going to go into that much deeper, but just know that a project can either be repeatable actions or non-repeatable actions, and we can track both inside of this dashboard. Once again, filter to only show habits related to this particular project. Okay. Then next up, we have the two knowledge views. The first one is the meeting notes, and this one is just a very practical one. We can use this whenever we have a meeting with someone. We can just create a new one over here. The meeting note is automatically generated. So if you go over here, you can see that under templates, we have meeting notes template is set to default. So it automatically makes meeting note template. We can just open that one up, and then we can prepare the agenda, have our key takeaways, have our meeting actions. We've covered all of this in the knowledge database video, so I'm not going to go too much in depth on that. And then the last part that we have over here is the general knowledge view. And over here we have all of the created knowledge. These are all our ideas, our brainstorms, all the things that we have generated, and all of the learning knowledge. These can be things that we've gathered from articles, from books, from podcasts, and we're taking all this stuff and we have it in one central place. And once again, we're only seeing knowledge pieces related to this particular project. So we have all the knowledge, all the execution in one central place, all the production capacity to help us realize the goals that we want to realize. Few small things here. We have a little scratchpad for ideas that we just want to jot down real quick. Last week I also showed you we have a general scratchpad, right? We have that one over here for very tiny ideas. What we can do during our daily review, right? Let's open up a daily review real quick. What we could do during our daily review is when we have the scratchpad over here and we can say, hey, actually this particular idea is related to this project. You can simply grab that, Command X, go into that project and put it in the scratchpad here. So scratchpad is just quick ideas. Usually I have like 30 points in there over time. And then when it gets too big, I apply some methods to filter it out and get the value from it. So these are just like very quick notes that don't need a particular knowledge piece to be created. Over here, we have the milestones, which are things that we want to achieve as we go, right? So if my goal is to get 50,000 revenue per month, then maybe one of my goals is finish the web shop, earn 10 in revenue, get 50 customers. These could all be milestones, right? And we also had that over here in the definition of done, right? Which steps will I need to complete? We have the milestones over here, and as we're progressing, we can just simply check those off. Then the third part here is the links and documents. These are all of the knowledge pieces that cannot live inside of Notion, things that are reports, documents, things that are externally generated and cannot be used on Notion. We can simply put that over here. And that is basically the project workspace. So then when we have finished a project, when the project is officially done, then we can move into this last section, which is the reflection questions, which just help us think back on everything that we've done. The first question is, what were the objectives that you set out to complete and what did you actually end up completing, right? Because sometimes the objectives, they change midway. For example, during our monthly review, we also check in with our SMART goals. So I can show you that over here. Another sneak peek. Today you're getting all the sneak peeks into the system. And just accidentally generated that one. Over here you can see we have all the active SMART goals. And we might change those during our monthly reviews. As we're going, we might change these active SMART goals. So the thing that we initially were scoping might change as we are moving along with this project. So that's the first question. What were the objectives? What did I actually do? The second question is, how satisfied are you with the outcome and the process of this project? So we both measure the result. What did it end up giving me? Did I get this 50K revenue that I wanted to get? But we also check in with the process. Is the process of the project something that I am satisfied with? Did I enjoy doing this project? Is there things that I need to improve? Then the next question is, how much time and energy did I plan to invest, right? What were the expected hours and the expected timeline? And then how much did I actually end up investing? Is there a gap between those two things? Is there something that I can learn from that? And then the last question is, what did I learn from this project? Anything else that I just want to write down, any insights, anything that I learned, anything that I gained, we can just write that down here. And then, of course, we celebrate the completion of this project. Because like I mentioned during the flowchart part of this video, completing a project is hard. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of commitment, and you should celebrate that. You should celebrate yourself for doing that. You should celebrate for making this commitment and seeing it through, and that is the end of the project tracker template. Cool. Okay. Last thing we are going to discuss is the project views. So let's go back into the database collection zone, open up the project tracker over here, and then there's a bunch of views that we have over here. The first one is the timeline. The timeline is basically a timeline with all of the projects that we have got going on. And this one, you can find it in the planning zone, just like you can find the next up projects in the planning zone. And basically, it's just a nice visual overview of all the projects and their place in time. You can see this is a project that's active. This one is next up. You can see the date that the time span has. Then the other view is the next up projects. These are all the projects that are not currently active, but that we are planning to work on in the future. Then we have the active projects, which are all the projects that we are currently working on, right? Status is active, and we can see the weekly workload that we have for these projects. You can find these in the execution zone over here. All of the active projects are inside the execution zone. Then we have the completed and terminated projects. These are similar views, but one is the projects that we actually completed successfully, other ones that we terminated. You can find these in the review zone right over here. Completed and terminated projects. There are no projects in here, but if I were to, for example, change this one, give that a status of completed, then of course you would see that here in the completed projects. So completed and terminated projects. And the last view that we have, just going back over here, is the weekly review view. And this is the one I showed you briefly earlier, where during the weekly review, which is what we're going to cover in the next video, we have a view. So I'm just going to open this one up, open the weekly review template, open up that page, and then look over here, and we have a view in which we can see the progress of the project name, so we can easily open it, and we can easily add new actions as we're planning the week ahead. Then we have the weekly workload, the review date, and whether it's overdue, and how many days past date. And next video, I'm going to show you how this works, but that is basically the weekly review project tracker view. And those are all of the different views. If you want to build the Notion of Life system from scratch using all these videos, then all power to you. If instead you just want to use the template straight away, then enrollment for a Notion of Life is currently open. You can grab a 20% early bird discount in the description down below and get the template straight away. However, I never want money to be the reason people cannot get access to my material. So if the price is too steep, send me an email and we'll arrange something. As mentioned in the beginning of this video, all the links, assets, and resources mentioned in this video are linked in the description down below. In the next video, we are going to explore the weekly review, which is the process that we use at the end of the week to start and end our weeks with clarity and intent. If you want to watch this series, there is a playlist on my channel, so you can just watch all the episodes in there. And for now, I just want to thank you for watching. And remember, the nature of reality is change. But how it changes, that is up to us.